Or for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you so much, Prosecutor General Kostin, for being here. This is a very, very difficult conversation. We have seen a pattern of war crimes committed by Russia, the targeting of Ukrainian cultural symbols, mass sexual violence in the battlefield areas like Kharkiv and Kherson. We have seen torture. We've seen the murder of civilians. But this question of the forcible taking of children moves us into a whole other realm, because it is about the destroying of families, the destroying of identity. One of the legal definitions of genocide is the forcible taking of children. So just to have it on the record here for the Canadian people, you've identified 19,000 forcible deportations. You've identified children who are being put up for adoption illegally. You've stated that teenagers are being forced into military training. How systemic is this, and what is this pattern telling us about Russia's attempt to destroy Ukrainian identity and Ukrainian families?
This is a pattern used by Russia in order to destroy Ukraine as a nation, because kidnapping our children in such a massive scale is an attempt to steal our future, the future of our nation. And the first arrest warrant, as we mentioned already, and Putin to be at the top of this systematic practice is explicit evidence that this is a part of Russian genocidal policy against Ukraine and Ukrainians. You absolutely rightly mentioned that first transfer of children from one group to another is in itself a part of crime of genocide. We also have witnessed not only this element of genocide, but also another one, the incitement to commit genocide. We have already 2 convictions in Ukrainian courts against Russian propagandists, including one who publicly called on killing of Ukrainian children, sinking them in the river. So with this, the other propagandist, Gasparyan, who is now also convicted by Ukrainian court, he is the author of so-called term denazification, which they used against us. And he is one of the leaders of this incitement to genocidal policy. And of course, when this is a systematic from incitement to commission of the element of genocide, it's explicit evidence that the genocidal intent of Russian Federation to erase, to eliminate Ukrainians as a nation is in fact present.
Thank you for that. I have a 2-part question. One is, in order to deal with international war crimes, it's important to be able to name and identify. So we've identified, obviously, Vladimir Putin is a major war criminal, and Madame Lvova-Belova, the so-called children's minister. How much work has been done to identify the enablers, the functionaries, the low-level people who are engaged in the forcible taking of children, who have obligation to protect those children? Are we able to start naming them and issuing warrants on the international, in the international arena? As well, the 19,000 forcibly deported children, do we have good records on where we think they may be, who they are, their families? What is the connection in terms of the importance of having that information?
Mr. Kostin?
This is extremely important information in order to make possible to prosecute and to punish everyone who is involved in this commission of this crime. And second, to have information where our children are in order to return them back home. Because accountability in itself is not enough to return our children back home. It's an important element of, I would say, pressure over Russian authorities to start to return our children, but it's not enough. That's why we are calling on creation of international mechanism how to return back our children, where Canada is one of the leaders together with Ukraine, uniting the other nations who are ready to help us. Coming back to your first question, of course we have investigations, as I already mentioned, where we know those who are involved in commission of this crime, I mean abduction of our children on higher and medium level and regional level. And once we have this information, we immediately share to us to sanction them, as I mentioned, while we are continuing our investigation. So for the names which we identified, we're sharing this information in order to sanction them prior to indict. On international level, of course, we are going on with the helping the ICC to investigate this case wider and broader, and I hope we will all see results of this investigation in future.
Thank you. I want to go to a more sensitive area in terms of the support for the families. Canada has its own dark history of forcibly taking children in the Indigenous communities and children that were taken as a government policy. And I represent many families who've gone through that, and the trauma is multi-generational. We're still picking up the pieces for policies that were enacted 20, 30, 40 years ago. So I know we're talking about children who are at risk now, but what are the supports in place for the families? Do you have the resources necessary, given the fact that with the war and everything else, to support the families? Because this is going to have long-term implications to protect families and protect those children.
Thank you very much for this question. You really raised a sensitive issue, since our policy on the governmental level is to ensure support to all victims and survivors of this war. While the large number of victims and survivors of this war, and definitely the relatives, the parents of kids who were kidnapped, are already victims of this war. At the moment, waging this war, which was unprovoked and unjustified, we lived in our country peacefully. We were attacked by Russia. Part of our economy, substantial part of our economy and industry is destroyed by Russia. And in order to run the country and to ensure that all victims of this war have properly social security and support from the government, we need such support on long-standing basis from our friends and allies. And helping Ukrainians who are now affected for this war, it's not just helping our government to run the country in time of war. It's not only helping us to close the deficit of our budget. It's completely humanitarian in nature, because these people can receive social security payments and protection only with the help of international community who stand with Ukraine.
So Canada can help on that?
Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Angus. Sorry, time is out. And now, because we